used another hour or two of sleep this morning. We're going to get going here. I want to catch you up to speed on this sermon series that we began last Sunday by the title that you see up there on the screen. We are exploring in these 6 weeks the behavior of Christian folk, us. That behavior which unfortunately at times repels people from the faith as opposed to draws people to the faith. This is kind of a confessional sermon series, but it's also a powerful message because indeed we can change and we can do some things and learn some things about ourselves that might help to draw people to the faith rather than repel people from the faith. We're taking some time too in these 6 weeks to celebrate when Christians get it right. There are times, plenty of times, that I see a Christian person do something and I say, yeah, that's what Jesus would have done. That's what Jesus would want us to do. Now there's a stimulus for the series, and the stimulus is based on some statistics that are showing up right now, just in the last few years. The statistics show that there are a record number of people, more than ever before, that are turning away from Christianity. Now this is not the natural flow of folks that happens often in those kind of young adult years. I call them the college age years. I was campus minister for 10 years and saw it happen. Sometimes students would come to college and they'd say, this is my chance to try some other things, to get away from the church for a while, and to do some other things. That became kind of a natural tendency. Most of those folks at some point came back to the church and came back to Christianity and chose Christianity as their expression of faith. Today, record numbers of folks are not coming back. They're seeing something about the behavior of Christian folk that says to them, I don't particularly want to have anything to do with Christianity if this is what Christianity is about. About 6 years ago, there was a group called the Barnum Group. They did a study of the perception that non-Christian people have of Christian people. They were asked the question, what do you perceive is the primary or most prevalent behavior or attitude or approach by Christian people? Now there's 5 areas where criticism of Christian behavior was placed. And Jake, if you bring those up, they're on the slide right up here. Right up there. There they are. Let me read through them real quick. First is the unchristian ways that some Christians act. Second is the anti-intellectual, anti-science stance of some Christians. Third is Christianity's view of other world religions. Fourth is questions related to the role of God in human suffering. And fifth is the way that Christians view homosexuality. Those are the 5 primary criticisms that a lot of non-Christian folks have of Christian folk. Okay? Now, a primary resource for this series is a book. It's written by Adam Hamilton, pastor of the Church of the Resurrection in Leawood, Kansas. Jake, bring up the cover of that book. There's the book. You will notice that in this sermon series, I added a few words to the title of the sermon series. I didn't go by just the title of the book. Jake, if you bring that sermon slide back up, you'll see the words that I added. Christians get it wrong, and sometimes right. Adam talks about when Christians get it right, and he talks about it in each of his chapters, and he even devotes a whole chapter to it. For some reason, he didn't put it in his title. I like it. I like, in the midst of our confession, in the midst of our saying, we don't get it right, there are times we get it right. And I want that to be up front and foremost. As I shared last week, I have a confession to make as we approach these subjects, and that is that they're close to my heart. And I have some emotion involved in them. Because I've been doing this for 30-some years now, and I've been around a lot of good Christian people. I've also been around a lot of good, well-meaning, good-hearted Christian people that say and do some of the most unhelpful things in the world. Not intending it to be mean, but intending it to somehow profess a theological understanding or belief or practice. And what happens is, sometimes this is dumped on non-Christian people, and non-Christian people are repelled. These are tough subjects. These are not easy subjects. They go to the core of our faith, the core of our beliefs. And I'll tell you right now, we're not going to agree on all of them. You're not going to agree with me on all of them. I'm not going to agree with you on all of them. They're controversial, they're difficult, they're tough. But I do hope that as we explore them, that we will grow in our faith, that we will learn something about ourselves, and that we will learn ways that we might share the faith with other people that draws them to God, as opposed to turning them away from Christ. So I'm going to move today to the perceptions. Last Sunday we talked about some of the behaviors, unchristian behaviors that Christian folks do. Today we're going to look at Christians and science. I'm postponing our discussion of Christianity and politics that I had planned on including in the sermon today. That's why Jenny only read the Genesis story today. I didn't ever read the other letters from Paul that talks about politics and government and Christians and all of that. I'm hoping sometime in the next few weeks we'll get to it. We've got a few weeks to go, and we'll see if we can fit that in. But trying to fit it into this sermon made the sermon way too long. So today we're just going to look at science. You heard the story of creation, at least the first part of it. That is in Genesis. Jenny read it this morning. We've heard that story many times in our lives, haven't we? It's a wonderful, beautiful, poetic story. It also has become, over the years, a center of controversy. Sometimes we sense that modern science and Christianity are not compatible. Sometimes in our world we see that Christian folks say it's either that or the other. It's not both. It's either creation or it's science, but it's not both. Now that may be one of the places we don't quite get it right. There is a perception out there of non-Christian people that Christians use this thing in our head that God gave us less than others. And God actually did give me a brain. Contrary to popular opinion, I do have a brain. And I know that God has told me to use that brain and think about things and gain knowledge and gain truth and to somehow blend that with my faith. So it's difficult for me to watch Christian behavior when it says it's either that or it's that. And we're going to battle it out. We're going to battle it out in our schools. We're going to battle it out in our state governments. We're going to battle it out. It's either one or the other. One wins, one loses, and that's the way it is. It seems as though to some non-Christian folk that it's we Christian folk who have constantly been pushing back at advances in science. It was 1633, several centuries ago, that there was a tribunal of the church that pronounced Galileo. Remember that name? We learned about him in school. Galileo was pronounced a heretic. Remember why he was pronounced a heretic by the church? He had the shocking notion that the earth possibly moved around the sun, not the other way around. Heretical. That's not what the Bible says. If you read the Bible, the story of creation, and understand it, the Bible talks about the earth being flat. There's a heaven, there's a firmament, and there's something down below, the other place. So when Galileo talked about the earth being round and going around the sun, he was charged with heresy. Now today it's common and accepted knowledge that the sun sets at the center of our solar system, and the earth circles around the sun. And not only that, but there are countless other solar systems where that is also true, where planets circle around their star, just like our planets circle around our star, the sun. As we hear the challenges about this, and as we think about this example of Galileo, Adam challenges us to consider what causes this battle that we have with science, this we and them. And he suggests it all centers into one word, and that word is fear. He goes on to explain that scientific knowledge, often by people of faith, is seen as something that's going to somehow challenge and reduce our faith instead of enhancing it. Adam says, possibly instead of seeing science as the enemy, is it possible that science might blend into our faith, into our understanding of the majesty and glory of creation that really has the potential not to weaken our faith, but to strengthen our faith? I've told you all before that one of the things I love to do is to look at a night sky. One of my favorite places to do that, I don't know if Jesse Lee's here today or not, but I walk down to the end of Mercury Street, down by Jesse Lee Steinman's house. And there's this field, cornfield. And I'm able to stand there, and because I'm away from all the lights, I can look up into the night sky. The majesty of a night sky, the stars, and the darkness, and the infinity of all of that. I love to sit there and revel in the beauty and the awe and the wonder of that part of our creation. Sometimes I just sit there and I say, how great thou art. But I also like to go to a planetarium. You know, a planetarium is where you sit in a chair and there's this big dome and they shine that night sky up there electronically, and then they explain it. They explain the details of it. They explain all of the knowledge we have of that. I love that. I love to combine my awe of the night sky with this wonderful knowledge of the night sky. I love the fact that the Andromeda Galaxy is the closest galaxy to ours. The closest. And yet we know that it takes 2 million years for the light of that galaxy to reach our eyes. Traveling at 186,000 miles per second. 2 million years it takes for that light to get to us. And that's one galaxy of an infinite number that are farther away from that. As I share my faith in a God that somehow was a part of this creation of this night sky, with the information and the knowledge of it, my faith is strengthened. I realize I'm not like everyone. For other folks, that may not happen. That scientific knowledge may be more of a threat than an enhancement to faith. And that's probably what non-Christians perceive when they see us say, no, it's just okay to know that God created it, and we don't need to know anything about it. Anything else we know about, as a matter of fact, really produces our faith. Came to a head in 1925. I'm testing you all on your history that you all did in school. Remember that? Some of you are still there in school learning this stuff. Dayton, Tennessee, 1925. Science became the enemy. Remember what the subject was? Some of you are shaking your heads, you good historians. It was the issue of evolution. There was a law on that state, in that state. And the law said that if you taught anything other than the creation of humankind as it is literally expressed in the Bible, that you would be arrested. Remember the name of the teacher that dared to teach evolution? John Scopes. And he was found guilty of breaking that law. Now, interesting, that law, the constitutionality of that law, was upheld until 1967. And it was repealed in 1967. To a lot of non-Christian folks today, thinking folks, they look back at that and say, wow, Christianity was not the winner of that trial. Christianity was the loser. Can science and faith complement each other? That's the key question. I believe it can, and I believe it does. We don't always get it quite right. And it may complement it much more than we realize. One of the ways that we can find some hope in this question is to make sure we define science and faith differently and understand what each of them are. Science is what helps us understand the physical process of how the universe works, the how and the what. Faith teaches us what our existence means, the what and the how and the why. Religion, or faith, answers, what is our purpose? Who has been a part of this purpose? That's one of the reasons why Christians get it wrong when we try to use Genesis as a science book. It's not a science book. It's a wonderful, beautiful, poetic version of a God who created and loves us and created us in God's image and said, it's good. And we're good. You wouldn't take a detective novel and try to find a recipe for a pie in it, right? And you wouldn't go looking in a detective novel for how you bake a pie. You'd be terribly disappointed if you looked for that in that particular book. But yet we tend to say that with our Genesis, don't we? So here's how the earth was created, scientifically. Genesis doesn't really tell the how, it tells the who, and that's the point of the story. The words are written to stir the soul, to give us faith that God is good and so are we, that creation is a gift, and that we are created in God's image. And the more I learn about biology and the function of this kooky, crazy body that God gave me to travel through this world with, the more I learn about the fact that I wake up every morning and that there's blood flowing through this body and that this brain sometimes works and that all of those things delicately, intricately work to keep this body going. I'm amazed. And yet all the knowledge I have of that, I still have within me, and my guess is you still have within you, the question, why? We know how it works. We know what we do with it. Why? Why are we here? What's the purpose of it? That's the question that we, people of faith, have an opportunity to answer for people. I do it pretty frequently with people who are facing death. families who are facing death, families who are experiencing death of a loved one. I can't tell them a whole lot about the biology of why their body is failing, or why their body of the body of their loved one failed or ended. I can tell them a little bit about that. But I can tell them what my faith is. That though these bodies are important, and this time we have on earth is important, it's not all there is. It's not all there is. There is more. I'll tell you how I approach it personally and how I approach it pastorally. I do it the same way. I say, God's given me this body. And I'm going to do what I can to keep it going as long as I can. I'm going to try to cut down on the sweets. I'm going to try to exercise. I'm going to take the medicine that we've learned helps. If I contract a disease, if I contract cancer, I'm going to do the chemotherapy. I'm going to do the radiation. I'm going to do what it takes in the scientific world to see if I can keep this body going as long as I can, all the while knowing it may end today, may end next week, may end a year from now, may end 30 years from now, may end 40 years from now. It's going to end. I know that. My scientific knowledge tells me this body will come to an end. But my faith says there's more. Listen to Paul's words that he shares with the Corinthians. He says, "So we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. For this slight momentary affliction is preparing us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all measure. Because we look not at what can be seen, but what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. For we know that if the earthly tent we live in is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens." There is more. There is more. That's when we get it right. Not in arguing the literalacy and the scientific presentation that we think Genesis is presenting, but the faith and the awe and the wonder and the deep heartfelt understanding and belief that there is a great and gracious God that's a part of that has given us this, and that we are connected to that God in a way that nothing can separate us. Nothing. That connection will continue, and just as I tell people who are facing that time of death, that moment when this body will shut down, and I say, there's something better. It's good. This body's done a lot of good things for us, given us a lot of good things to eat, taken us places we wanted to see, loved people we wanted to love. There's something even better when we take the next step. It may just be possible that faith and science are valuable partners, not enemies, in understanding our place in the universe. And it may be possible that the study of science, instead of damaging our faith, actually deepens it. I want to invite you to consider that. I want to invite you to consider being in dialogue about that, especially with other non-Christian folks who have this perception and have this assumption that we don't think about science, that we don't necessarily see it as the enemy. I think if we can share that approach with folks that are searching for a faith that says it's okay to think, it's okay to gain knowledge and truth. Our faith is big enough for that. when that happens, my hope would be that the way we share our Christian beliefs will draw people to the faith, as opposed to repelling people. That's my hope. Would you pray with me?